Hi everyone, happy end of the semester. I realize that we don't have any more work to do for class, but I love to post a final video at the end of the semester. There's always a lot of just kind of loose ends I want to tie up and also say that you guys have been a wonderful class this semester. So first things first, you guys did a wonderful job on your special topics presentations. I haven't graded them yet, but I have started looking through them. This class definitely chose some diverse topics. I'm going to peek at my notes. I wanted to say that you all did an excellent job. There were a few topics that I wanted to point out because I thought they may be something you hadn't been as familiar with, as well as a couple of resources that I thought were really excellent. I would encourage you all to look into. So several of you chose to look into twice exceptional students, which I think is a great topic. These students are often underserved in gifted education, also in special education. So I was happy to see several of you guys look into that. I wanted to say that Kayla in her presentation had a really interesting video from the perspective of a twice exceptional student. So I'd encourage you to go back and look at that if you haven't. A couple of other topics that you may be less familiar with. Allison did a really interesting presentation on makerspaces. So if you are not familiar with makerspaces, they're pretty common in the field of creativity, particularly like corporate creativity. If you think of Google, or there's another researcher named Teresa Amabile, they are well known for creating environments that are conducive to creativity. What a makerspace is like a meetup place for individuals to come and be creative together. So they're known to have a lot of different resources, not just like tangible resources, but also different informational resources. And one of the greatest resources of a makerspace is the fact that multiple individuals come together. So the concept is that individuals come together to make things and to come up with new ideas. I have seen makerspaces in the field of gifted ed be quite helpful for students who are highly, highly gifted. So some students who are extremely gifted may have these kind of like splinter skills where they are super interested in one concept and that's all they care about. And in that case, a makerspace is really helpful because they're just really able to throw themselves into that one content area. I can't remember who it was, but someone commented on that presentation about seeing like a makerspace as something that could be a constant environment in the classroom and having it as like morning work where the children are all working on their one individual project, which I think is a great adaptation of a makerspace because if students have a constant supply of these certain resources, it's definitely gives them the opportunity to work on one project for an extended period of time. When we talked about creativity, that idea of openness is oftentimes encouraged when we give long-term projects that have very ill-defined deadlines because they can constantly be evolving. Many schools will have maker spaces in like the media center. They'll have maybe like a classroom that's branched off. I've had several students that have, after this course, actually decided they wanted to create a makerspace. So if you happen to have like extra office space, it can be as simple as starting just to compile a lot of supplies for students, more like artistic supplies, and then gradually building up to more informational supplies. The key is that it's a very flexible learning environment and the students take initiative on what they want to learn. A couple of other presentations I think are worth mentioning in terms of some unique content. I was happy to see Pam look into underrepresentation, but specifically for Native American students. So back when we were studying Invisible Gifted, I was really inspired by Pam's reaction to that topic because she mentioned that lots of the infographics were actually missing information on Native American students. That is a huge issue. And I was really encouraged to see her look into that. She also mentioned in her resources something called the Javits Grant. So the Javits Grant is one of the few federal funding resources for gifted education. It is specifically funding for students who are underrepresented in gifted ed, but most of the work in terms of Javits grants have been focused on African American students, which has been wonderful. There's been a lot of really great work for African American students that has come out of JABITS grants. I don't know of much off the top of my head, however, for Native American students. So I thought it was really insightful of her to dig deeply into that content. And I'm encouraged by that and looking forward to look into her resources even deeper when I go back to grade. Kimberly did a good job looking at leadership and specifically talking about how we can guide leadership. I think a lot of times in gifted ed or just education in general, we think that leadership is like you've got it or you don't, but she did a good job unpacking some of the skills that we can encourage students to develop. Several of you looked into English language learners, and I was happy to see more mention of the tabs in those presentations, as well as other alternative assessments. Christina had a great presentation on emotional needs of gifted students. So she mentioned a concept called asynchronous development. I'm not sure if we talked about that in this class yet, but asynchronous development is basically when your head is a little bit ahead. Your head, meaning your brain, is a little bit ahead of your body. That came out a little bit convoluted itself. It's basically saying that your brain is developing more quickly than your body is. It creates a lot of really interesting social and emotional needs for students. Sometimes their brain is capable of thinking, but their fine motor skills aren't capable of doing. So I thought that was an interesting topic for her to bring up that you may not have heard of before. Bailey also had a really great presentation on underachieving gifted students. There's a lot of different reasons for underachievement, ranging from cultural reasons to sometimes students are just so gifted that, like we've talked about before, they don't see the purpose in school, and therefore they don't connect school to their real life's passions. The last one I wanted to discuss was Christy's on ability grouping. Specifically, she had a great slide in there that talked about the difference between tracking and grouping. So I would encourage you to go and look at that. That would be really powerful to share with your colleagues. So again, all the presentations were great. I just wanted to pick through a few that you may have been less familiar with and encourage you to go back and look through everything. You guys are each other's best resource. I encourage you to keep in touch after this class as well. The last thing I wanted to recap is your final discussion post. So I asked you, what is the most eye-opening content that we've gone over, and then what are 2 or 3 things you would like to ensure that all of your colleagues know about gifted ed? Overwhelmingly, the majority of you said that our module on Invisible Gifted was really impactful, which makes me happy because that's my favorite content. And also is very true for me as well, because when I first started studying gifted ed, I had a lot of underlying assumptions about this concept of invisible gifted, and I think I was pretty naive to what's going on. So I was happy to see several of you talk about how that conversation even impacted your concept about like the referral process for gifted ed. Several of you also mentioned our conversation on creativity being impactful. Emily did a good job saying that creativity is not like one-dimensional, but there's multiple different facets of it. I think it's important as we continue to grow as educators that we don't fall prey to those biases about creativity. And it's not just art, it's also not just a product, but we can be creative in our thought process. Several of you mentioned some kind of aha moments that came from your special topics. And many of you went back to our very first module on the myths of gifted ed and what gifted education is in the first place. So I think that's really powerful as well. In terms of what you would want your other colleagues to know, I can't remember who it was, but someone phrased this so beautifully that gifted students are gifted 24 hours a day. This is not something that's just turned on when they are pulled out for gifted education services, but they were always gifted. Several of you mentioned the social and emotional needs that go along with being gifted as well. I was encouraged to see you guys talk about how giftedness extends beyond just academics, being gifted in leadership abilities or even artistic abilities and communication abilities. If I had to sum up that final discussion post, it would be a definite commitment for this dynamic perspective rather than a deficit perspective. I was really encouraged to see you guys talking about, quote, problem students who are actually gifted, or, quote, negative behaviors that are really manifestations of a trait that's rooted in giftedness. So I think you all did a wonderful job on that, and I'm always encouraged to look at that final discussion post. And mostly I'm encouraged by just the conversations that I have with all of you, and know that you're really taking the content seriously. Even in your discussion posts, this class has done a particularly good job of talking about how to apply the content to your actual classroom, not just for the purpose of writing on a discussion board in our class. So I have really enjoyed working with all of you this semester. I've enjoyed the opportunity to meet several of you all in person. My door is always open. This population of students is so diverse, and there are so many different opportunities that can come up with this. So I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to get to know you all, for the opportunity for us to work together. That being said, please remember where I am. Please remember that you can email me at any time. Feel free to drop by. I am working on a couple of different research projects in terms of gifted education. I'm working on one that is actually unpacking our See-Me statements that we wrote for Invisible Gifted. And I'm also working on one that is rooted around the tabs, if you're interested in that. So if you want to dip your toe into the research world and see what that is like, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. Really, I just want you guys to remember that you are the gatekeepers for gifted education. Whether or not you become the, quote, gifted teacher, you are interacting with these students all the time, maybe not even in your classroom, but in the hallway. And I just think it's been really encouraging to see you guys just develop that dynamic mindset and see it play out in your work in class, and also in the conversations that we've had, either in person or via email. So once again, thank you for all of your hard work, and feel free to contact me at any time, and hopefully we will all stay in touch. Thank you.